John Anderson was already used to the stairs. At 70 years old, with a distinguished demeanor and a fortune carefully amassed over decades of hard work, he knew he carried an aura that drew both respect and curiosity. What he didn't expect was the type of gaze he encountered that night. The charity event was like any other in Manhattan, a gleaming ballroom, soft live music playing in the background, and people circulating with champagne glasses in hand. John was there out of social obligation, seated at a table in the back, lost in his own thoughts. That's when he saw her. Emily Clark. She crossed the room with calculated confidence. She wore an elegant black dress that highlighted her slender figure, and her blonde hair fell loosely over her shoulders. But it was the smile that caught his attention, a smile that seemed to say, "I know I'm being watched, and that's exactly what I want." She saw him, too. Their eyes met for a moment long enough to leave something unspoken in the air, and then she looked away, pretending to be engrossed in conversation with a waiter. Later, it was she who approached him. "Mr. Anderson, isn't it?" Her voice was gentle, but carried a tone of certainty. John looked up from his whiskey glass and smiled. "Yes, and you are?" "Emily Clark. I work with one of the organizations benefiting from this event. I thought I should come thank you for your generosity." He chuckled, a low, discreet laugh. "I think my generosity is being overstated, but thank you." Emily sat down beside him, leaning forward slightly. Modest and generous. A rare combination. The conversation flowed with an ease that unsettled him. Emily was witty, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in everything John had to say. He shared stories about his late wife, how she had been the love of his life, and how he missed having someone to share simple moments with. Emily listened intently, occasionally touching his arm in gestures that seemed casual, but were carefully calculated. At that moment, John didn't see the ambition. He saw the companionship. In the weeks that followed, they met frequently. Sophisticated dinners, strolls in the park, even a concert. John allowed himself to feel something he hadn't in years, to fall in love. Emily, on the other hand, was playing a much more deliberate game. She had a clear goal of earning his trust, and it was working. When John finally proposed, he was visibly nervous. "Emily, I know we're different, ages, worlds, maybe even expectations," he began, holding her hands across the table. She interrupted him with a smile. "John, none of that matters. What matters is how I feel about you." Deep down, Emily knew she had one. The wedding was discreet, just as John wanted. A few friends and distant relatives, with no hint of extravagance. There was no prenuptial agreement. When one of his lawyers suggested it, John dismissed the idea with a laugh. "That's not necessary. I trust Emily." And so the marriage began. For all appearances, they were the perfect couple. Emily dazzled John's social circles with her charm, while he seemed revitalized by her presence. But behind closed doors, Emily began to take advantage. Extravagant spending, lavish dinners, endless shopping, all funded by John's fortune. He didn't seem to mind. At least, not yet. Their first wedding anniversary arrived as an opportunity for celebration. Emily, accustomed to organizing extravagant events, envisioned a grand party at John's mansion, complete with live musicians, tables overflowing with champagne, and a guest list full of important names. But John, with his characteristic calm, suggested something more intimate. "How about a trip?" he said over breakfast, helping himself to a slice of toast. "Just the two of us. No fuss." Emily looked at him with slight surprise. A trip might not have the glamour of an event with hundreds of people, but it also meant unlimited access to shopping and luxuries in another country. More importantly, it meant more direct control over John's wallet. "I'd love that," she replied, with a smile that seemed genuine. "Do you have a place in mind?" "Spain," he answered. "We've always wanted to go together, haven't we?" The plan was quickly arranged, with Emily ensuring the trip would be as luxurious as possible. They stayed at a five-star hotel in Madrid, an imposing building with marble columns and staff who attended to guests with almost theatrical precision. Emily spared no expense, shopping at renowned boutiques, expensive treatments at the hotel spa, and dinners at award-winning restaurants became their daily routine. John seemed to enjoy it in his own way. He preferred cultural outings, like visiting museums and historic cafes. His pace was slower, a serenity Emily attributed to his age. She, on the other hand, seized the opportunity to indulge in everything the city had to offer. One day, midway through their trip, John said, "I need to take care of a few things downtown." Something about that investment in a Spanish vineyard. Of course, darling, Emily replied, not even looking up from the fashion magazine she was leafing through in their suite. John left alone while Emily spent the day at a luxury jewelry store. She bought gold earrings adorned with sapphire stones and began imagining the occasions where she could flaunt them. When John returned to the hotel, she was sitting on the bed, surrounded by gift boxes and shopping bags, flipping through a magazine while sipping a glass of white wine. "You were gone a while," she commented casually. "A bit longer than I expected," he replied with a calm smile. The trip continued without major incidents. Emily posted carefully curated photos on social media, her and John at Retiro Park, her in front of the Sagrada Familia, her holding a new designer handbag on the streets of Barcelona. To her audience, they appeared to be a happy couple, celebrating a year of marriage. John was attentive, always making small gestures to please her, flowers in their room, romantic dinners, seaside strolls. Yet, Emily started to notice something strange. There was a subtle distance in his eyes, a quietness that hadn't been there before. "Is everything all right?" she asked one evening as they dined at a candlelit restaurant. "Everything's perfect," he replied without hesitation. "I've never been happier." Emily accepted the answer, but something inside her remained uneasy. When they returned to the United States, the trip became a fond memory for Emily. She was confident that everything was still under control. Little did she know, that journey had been far more than just a simple anniversary celebration. Years passed, and the initial glow of their marriage began to fade. Emily, now 35, still lived a life surrounded by luxury, but something in John had changed. He seemed more introspective, more cautious. At first, she tried to ignore it. After all, she still had access to his fortune, unlimited credit cards, occasional trips, and designer jewelry. But the signs became harder to dismiss. John spent more time alone in his office, talking to lawyers and reviewing documents she never saw. He began to refuse some of her more extravagant requests, something he had never done before. "Darling, I was thinking about redecorating the living room," Emily said one morning, flipping through an interior design magazine. "I think we need new furniture, something more modern." John didn't look at her, remaining focused on his laptop screen. "I think the living room is fine as it is." Emily frowned. "John, it's just a small renovation. Nothing that would make a difference for us." "Emily," he replied, finally looking up at her, "we need to be a bit more responsible with our spending." It was the first time she had heard anything like that from him. John had always been indulgent, never questioning her whims. That comment set off an alarm in Emily. In the following months, she began noticing other signs. John canceled some planned trips, citing that he was busy with financial adjustments. He also started transferring some properties and assets into a trust, something Emily only discovered by accident when she opened an envelope that had arrived at their home. "John, what is this?" she asked, confronting him with the document. He calmly took the paper from her hands with a placid smile. "Just a reorganization of assets. Technical stuff, nothing you need to worry about." But Emily was worried. One day, while he was out, she searched his office for answers. She found a folder locked in a drawer, but without the key, she couldn't open it. There was something there, she was certain of it. Something he was hiding. Despite the growing tension, John continued playing his role. He still took her to elegant dinners and still made small gestures of affection. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect couple. But the facade started to crack. At a dinner with friends, Emily made a comment about an investment John had been discussing. "Well, at least we have the vineyard in Spain to offset any losses," she said casually, trying to sound informed. John went silent for a moment, just long enough for everyone to notice. "Oh yes," he finally replied with a strained smile. "The vineyard." Emily didn't understand his discomfort at the time, but something in the look he gave her sent a chill down her spine. Back at home, she tried to bring up the subject. "Why were you acting so strange tonight?" she asked as he removed his jacket in the bedroom. "Strange." John chuckled, though there was no humor in his voice. "I don't know what you're talking about." Emily pressed him, but he didn't give her any clear answers. For the first time, she began to doubt something she had always taken for granted, her control over him. John's behavior unsettled her. He was hiding something, and she knew it. But what? Determined to find out, Emily decided she needed to act before it was too late. Emily Clark had always known this day would come. From the moment she laid eyes on John Anderson, she had crafted a meticulous plan. Marriage was just an intermediate step, a pathway to what she truly wanted, half of John's fortune. During the 5 years they had been married, she played the role of the perfect wife. Even in moments of frustration with a quieter life he preferred, she never let it show. After all, her patience was about to pay off, and the reward was within reach. Now, Emily believed the perfect moment had arrived. She had everything mapped out. She knew John was a kind-hearted man, the type who would agree to an amicable divorce to avoid conflict. The absence of a prenuptial agreement was the cornerstone of her plan. Sitting in front of her bedroom mirror that morning, she rehearsed the exact tone she would use. It wouldn't be aggressive or demanding. It would appear mature and selfless, an act of love for them both. At breakfast, she found John on the veranda, reading the newspaper. His expression was calm as always. "John," she began, gently placing a hand on the table, "I think we need to talk." He looked at her over his glasses, curious. "Of course, dear. What is it?" Emily felt a small lump in her throat but forced a faint smile. "I've been thinking. These past few years have been incredible. But I feel like we're at different stages in life. I mean, you've already built your story, your legacy. And I feel like I need to find my own path now." John set the newspaper aside, folding his hands on the table. "Emily, what are you saying?" "I think we should separate," she said, pausing to gauge his reaction. "Not because something is wrong, but because maybe it's what's best for both of us." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Emily anticipated some reaction, shock, perhaps, or even sadness. But John just looked at her as if he were trying to make sense of her words. "Separate," he finally repeated, his voice low and emotionless. "Yes," she said quickly, leaning forward slightly. "I want this to be amicable. I don't want to fight or for this to hurt us. I just think we deserve the chance to be happy in different ways." John remained silent, his gaze fixed on her. Emily felt a slight discomfort but continued. "I've already spoken with a lawyer. He can help us resolve everything fairly. I want you to know I have no intention of being unfair to you." For a moment, the silence grew heavier. Then John smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile. "If that's what you think is best," he finally said. "I don't want you to be unhappy, Emily." "I never have." "I knew you'd understand," she replied, feeling a wave of relief. But there was something in his smile that unsettled her slightly, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. When she handed him the divorce papers a few days later, he read them calmly, without questioning anything, and returned them with a nod. "I'll do my part to make this easy for you," he said, his voice as steady as ever. Emily left his office feeling satisfied. Everything was going according to plan. Within weeks, she would have the money, her freedom, and a fresh start. What she didn't know was that the real twist was much closer than she could have imagined. The day in court arrived with the weight of inevitability that Emily could barely contain. She dressed carefully, choosing an elegant and understated dress, something that conveyed maturity and confidence. Sitting beside her lawyer, she prepared for the moment she saw as the culmination of her plan. John entered shortly after, as serene as ever, wearing a simple suit that seemed out of place in the grandeur of the courtroom. He sat quietly, showing no emotion, as the judge began reviewing the documents. Emily, however, felt victory within reach. She was certain John wouldn't challenge her. He was far too kind for that, a man who avoided conflict at all costs. Within days, she would be free, with half of his fortune in hand, ready to start her life the way she had always envisioned. The judge cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Before we proceed, I want to highlight a document submitted by Mr. Anderson's defense." Emily frowned, exchanging a brief glance with her lawyer. The judge continued. "According to Spanish law, this court recognizes a divorce that was legally processed 5 years ago between the parties during a trip abroad." The words hit Emily like a punch. "What?" she exclaimed, rising abruptly from her seat. The judge gave her a stern look. "Please compose yourself, ma'am. This doesn't make sense," she continued, ignoring the warning. "I never signed any divorce papers." John, seated across from her, remained calm. He almost seemed relieved. "Miss Clark," the judge said firmly, "according to the documentation provided, the divorce was granted unilaterally in Spain, where the law permits such proceedings. The process was conducted within legal boundaries, and this court has no grounds to invalidate it." Emily turned to John, her eyes filled with disbelief. "You knew about this?" He finally broke his silence, leaning forward slightly. Yes, Emily, he replied, his voice low but weighted. I knew. She couldn't hold back her anger. Why? Why would you do this to me? John sighed, removing his glasses and cleaning them slowly before answering. I knew from the beginning why you were with me. It wasn't for love. It wasn't for the life we shared. It was for the money. That's not true, she protested, but her voice faltered. Emily, do you think I didn't notice? From the very first dinner, the expensive gift, the growing demands. I knew, he said, looking at her directly now, his tone calm but firm. Then why stay with me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated for a moment before replying. Because despite everything, I enjoyed your company. For a while, you brought something new into my life. But I also knew it wouldn't last. And well, I needed to be prepared for when this day came. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emily stared at him, speechless, as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in her mind. The judge cleared his throat, breaking the tension in the air. Since the parties are already legally divorced, this court does not recognize the necessity of any asset division. This case is dismissed. Emily sat frozen as the words echoed through the room. Everything she had worked for, everything she had planned, crumbled before her eyes. John stood, adjusting his suit calmly. Before leaving, he stopped beside her. I never wanted it to end this way, Emily. But you made your choices. And with that, he walked out, leaving her alone in the courtroom, staring at the void that had become her future.